Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of the Mindful Wealth podcast. We're here today with special guest Adrian Schauer, which, as you will recognize from the last name, there might be some family relation there.
Thanks for having me, Tara.
Adrian is the CEO of AlayaCare, a company that does healthcare software, which he's going to tell us about a little bit more. And he's the co-founder of the Madiro Fund, which is a charitable organization, which he's also going to tell us about shortly. So, Adrian, just give us a little introduction. Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Great. Yeah, I'll tell you the slightly longer version of that. I did engineering in school, got really specialized in photonics just in time for the .com to kind of wipe out that industry. So I started my career at Rogers doing new product development. And then in 2004, I co-founded a mobile software business called Vortex with a friend that I played basketball with growing up. And we bootstrapped that business out of the basement into a decent sized startup. From there, we spun out a product we'd incubated into a separate company, which then we grew and ultimately sold in 2012. And then in 2014, I wanted to re-scratch my entrepreneurial itch. And at that stage, founded AlayaCare, which is a company that helps home healthcare providers run their business and deliver better care in the community. And so AlayaCare grew from that kind of seed in 2014. 7 years later now, we're 500 employees. Just raised a good size round from Al Gore's investment fund, Generation. And it's been a very interesting journey to date.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Madiro as well?
When I proposed to my now wife, Jillian, back in 2011, so Jillian's a pediatrician, has a big interest in global health. She was actually working in Kenya that summer with HIV positive patients in Eldoret, just north of Nairobi. And so when I proposed to her, in lieu of a diamond ring, I proposed by creating a foundation called Madiro, which became called Madiro, to basically leverage mobile technology, which was my domain, to help improve health outcomes for women and children in low and middle income countries, with a focus on Africa. So we started that, funded a few projects. And then in the latest financing round we did at AlayaCare, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to sell some shares and put a decent chunk of capital into Madiro. Now we've hired a CEO, really expanding into a number of initiatives, which maybe I'll talk about later if there's an opportunity.
I'm curious. I just poked around a little bit about you, and I see that you've multiple companies, both US and Canada. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, my focus has been mostly working with Canadian companies, but our customer base at AlayaCare is split between Canada, the US, and Australia, with a little bit in the Middle East and a little bit in Asia.
So just really quick, I want to get a sense for what it's like doing business in the US versus Canada.
Yeah.
And you were going to get into defining what true wealth is. And these things are going to be pulled into that in a sec. So what's your sense?
So one of my favorite sound bites around this, which I feel is really descriptive of what it's like when you build an innovative solution, you try and introduce it to the market, right? When you approach an early adopter customer in the US, the reaction tends to be, oh, can I be first? You approach a prospective customer in Canada and the reaction tends to be, ooh, am I going to be first? And so there's, it's kind of that risk tolerance and ambition. There is absolutely a cultural difference. Obviously that's just a, difference in the mean, doesn't describe everyone you're going to find on either side of the border. But there is, in my experience, a big difference in risk tolerance, north and south.
That is so cool. That sort of synopsis. I would like to see that as a graphed trend over 100 years to see how much that remains, 15 years from now. What's the projection like in the US from here? I'm just very curious. Whether it's people you're hiring or people that you are investing in, or, the people you're going to have as partners, what do you look for in that person? What are kind of the personal traits that you find boost both the company that you're working with or the company that you founded, and then boost their own success at the same time?
At the stage I'm at in my career now, it is very important to me to have value alignment, and AlayaCare is a purpose-driven organization. So we are unified in the ambition to enable the type of care we would want our loved ones to receive. And, in the early days of just trying to survive month to month, with a mobile marketing startup, that was kind of a luxury we couldn't afford, right? We had to make sure we could make the next payroll. With AlayaCare, I have the luxury to say, no, I want to build the business that it has the ability to, have the impact in the world that I'm interested in, and also, satisfy all the financial constraints at the same time. So right now, for me, we have to have a value alignment. I really appreciate, transparency and openness. Happy to be disagreed with, happy to debate everything, but let me know where you stand and we'll take it from there.
I do want to get to the terms and know how you define true life success. We call it true wealth. How would you define that?
Yeah. My mental model around this stuff is, when you think of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? At the top is self-actualization. And for me today, or in my life as it's instantiated right now, I'm not doing AlayaCare because I want to consume the wealth this business is going to create for me, right? I'm doing it because I think this is what I have to give to the world. And I want to do it to the fullest expression. So I totally recognize that's a luxury, like that is true wealth, right? To be able to have all your other needs so satisfied that you can choose to, express your why in that kind of framing. But that's it for me. I want to, be the best I can be at this craft I've chosen. I take a lot of pride in creating value for all the stakeholders around me and around AlayaCare. And, like with any business, it's your employees, your customers, your shareholders, and then you can draw it out to society and, a few other concentric circles around that. But I think when entrepreneurship goes best, you are just a nexus for those stakeholders to create value for each other. And, I've engineered my life into being able to make that my day-to-day. And so I feel pretty fulfilled.
So let me ask kind of a follow-up question about ambition. How do you see that fitting in? And then how do you see that either being a negative or a positive force in this whole equation?
Very good question. So let's look at two things. There's, the money side, right? Because I work to get as high a valuation as possible for AlayaCare, right? That translates into zeros in a bank account. And I'm playing that game for sure. I'm not, just doing a social enterprise here.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. By analogy, right? When I play a basketball game, I'm looking at the scoreboard. I enjoy a game of basketball where we're keeping score more than a game of basketball where we're not keeping score. Okay. But, you have to be in flow, which basically means it has to be the right level of challenge. And, there are a whole bunch of things that go along with it. But I definitely like to win. And in business, one of the ways in which you keep score is, money, right? Whether it's the profit of your business, which we don't happen to make any profit right now in this, weird software as a service game we play. It's not really a prerequisite, but our valuations go up. And, like I said, that translates into personal wealth. So I do care about how you measure success. But I look at it as just, you have to be immersed enough in a framework to care about winning, just like when you play a basketball game, you have to care about how often this little blown up piece of rubber goes through one hoop over another hoop. Like, it's totally esoteric, but it's part of what makes the game fun.
I got to pull on something here. Sorry, Terry. I saw you're going to say something, but you said something there. I'm not going to get the words right, but you're playing the game. The profits are not existent right now, but you want to make the valuation go up in your next round of valuation so that the money flows into the bank. That is, so let's take WeWork, Uber. You know, there's so many things that have just gathered money, gathered capital from potential resources, and are just tanking after the fact. And we have a lot of that in the United States, where venture capital invests. They do a follow-on investment to increase their own valuations. They increase their valuations. The company never has any hope of making any money. How do you square the?
But if I can insert some counterexamples,
please. No, there are great examples. No,
Amazon didn't turn a profit for a decade. Right. Salesforce didn't turn a profit for a decade. Go ahead and think of anything you want and figure out how that's going to show up on your doorstep tomorrow. And, Amazon did create value, and they used an overeager capital market to realize, a global next day supply chain business in 10 years instead of 100 years. You'll have some examples where it didn't work out, but to me, that's not a reason to say, okay, well, don't get in the game of deploying capital to chase big opportunities aggressively.
So, I think you said a lot of, about the positive aspects of ambition. I'm sure that you have the opportunity to witness places at which there's kind of a negative flip side to that. I wonder if you could, tell me kind of what you see at the level at which you're operating.
Yeah. So there is suffering, or at least the potential for suffering associated with any desire. Right. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that. And I have suffered plenty of times in this, 7-year AlayaCare journey. So again, I come back to this notion of flow, right? I would like to be on the edge of my skis, right? If I'm going to ski, I'm going to get up and go ski down a friggin' hill every day. I want to do that as best I can. And for at least the way my personality is constructed, that means finding your limits. And so, okay, when you're right on the edge of your skis, sometimes you're going to fall. Okay. Could you ski in such a way that you never fall? Yeah. Would that make me want to get up every day and go skiing? No. So I've plenty of times had phases of being overextended, or I would wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh, how am I going to close this circle? Well, I've promised this to these customers. I can't ask my employees to do anything more. I promised these things to my investors. This is all going to run out before we, spin up to the next level of this thing. And definite suffering associated with that. If there was no ambition, I would have avoided that suffering. But I'm just finding my flow state. And if I skied and never fell, I'd just be bored of skiing.
It's so funny because this really, Jonathan, really echoes our last show with Arno, who's actually a warriorship mindset person. And, one of the things he talks about is specifically that humans are constantly seeking comfort, but that in order to grow, we have to be constantly getting out of the comfort zone. And then how do you sort of manage the difference between those two things? And, he has his own methodology around that, but it sounds exactly, your metaphor of being on the edge of your skis it's exactly that, really.
Yeah. I mean, the lack of a life where I'm not invested in the meaning of what I'm doing is just so worse a type of suffering for me than sometimes getting my ass kicked by whatever I'm trying to succeed at.
So I want to touch. There's a couple things that are pulling at me right now. One of them is, and I realize I have two people from one family, so we can talk about starting point.
Yeah,
I think it's a privilege to be able to demand from life that you get to focus on something that gives, fulfills passions and that is give back to the world. That's a huge privilege. And the fact that you're in Canada and I'm in the US, there's a little bit of a difference there culturally as well. In other words, here we don't, and I don't know the systems in Canada as well, but here, if you try something big and fail, there isn't a safety net. Like there isn't something to pick you up. What is in Canada? And can you just speak to that starting point a little bit?
Both of our parents are immigrants, moved here from Austria and South Africa, and from two pretty different backgrounds, right? Our father grew up in post-war Austria. His father's greatest ambition for him was that he would get a civil service job because that would be stable income for his whole life. Okay. My mother grew up was born in Namibia, grew up, her father was a bit of a fanatic, but, accumulated some wealth, and she ran away from that. Okay. So then they met in Montreal in the, I guess, late 70s.
Yeah, 70s, late 70s.
Mid-70s. Thank you. In the mid-70s. And so they built their life in Canada, but we're not a 12th generation Canadian. So I think we've taken some things from our family history and some things from our cultural context. I would say the ambition and the success drive was very much something we picked up around the dinner table. Whereas I don't even know if altruism is the right word for it, but in Canada, we have a pretty functional society. And don't take the reverse of that. But
what are you saying?
The social contract is very much in place. Yeah. I am a very happy taxpayer. Yeah. Very happy. It's that when I look at the marginal benefit of that dollar of wealth for me versus for society, it's like obvious to me. Okay, take 50 cents of the incremental dollar and reinvest it in society. It's not that just makes sense to me. So I don't know if that is a cultural difference. Certainly Canada is not a homogenous place. Alberta is the Texas of Canada. You have everything up and down the political spectrum here too. But I think there might be a little more of that. The social contract is still really in place here in Canada. Not that everybody loves the government and doesn't think there's waste here, there, and wherever. But in general, I would say we feel like we get out what we put in for our social contract.
And so I guess if we were to ask something else about sort of the external markers of success, I think you answered some of this earlier when you talked about, the analogy of making money with basketball. But let's say we wanted to reconcile playing that game with everything else in life, because it's one thing to run a kind of successful business in which you're looking at certain metrics, put something of value into the world that's making the world a better place. But then how do you sort of reconcile that with your own well-being, your own maybe spiritual practice? How do you marry that with a fulfilling personal experience?
I'm not going to try and do a prescription for everyone, but I'll tell you about what works for me. So I mentioned this aspect of, wanting to have the right amount of challenge. It's important to me to have meaning in what I do. And that's not just about winning. It's also, does it align? Do I have integrity? Does it align with everything else I believe in? And that's where, it's such a joy to watch, and like a new immigrant come to Canada, start working at AlayaCare, 6 years later, they've had their second kid, they bought their house, they've just living out a fantastic dream. They've, more than doubled their income. And, that's just meaningful to me. But I think it's meaningful to anybody. But, that's important. And then our end market, the extent to which we succeed is the extent to which our society manages to care for frail and elderly in their home in a more human way. So there's a lot of positive in this situation I put myself in with AlayaCare.
Yeah, no, I think it did. I wonder if I could just poke it in the direction of like maybe a bit more personal, Yeah.
Okay. So the pillars of my life that, help me be a whole person. My work life, in the ideal scenario, it feels like a hobby. Then I need a certain amount of sports in my life. I'd be miserable without it. I have a preference for team sports and a preference for competitive sports. Again, maybe how I'm wired, maybe how I was raised, but I need that to be in balance. I need my family life to be fulfilling. I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and everything that goes along with having a young family there. So the extent to which I can keep that in balance and all the relationships flourishing is important.
I want to talk about the kids and the lesson you actually talked about moments ago. That is, when you're skiing, I'm assuming the kids ski at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're skiing and you're pushing it, because it's not worth not pushing it. Do you tell them, they come, hey dad, I didn't wreck today. Did you say, well, you're not skiing hard enough? Do you actually give them that kind of advice and that kind of push?
Yeah. I talk about it as, and anytime they have a fall, let's say, and then some aversion to doing that thing again, my first reaction is, amazing, Damien, you found your limit. That's great. Now you know where that limit is. And, but by the way, that's going to keep moving. You're going to have to test it again in a little while, but, it's not bad that you fell. It's good that you found that limit. And so I find myself more often encouraging the other side of that, which is, take every knock into a growth opportunity, and have a growth mindset on stuff. In my particular case, my son definitely doesn't need encouragement to take risks. My daughter does sometimes, and in the dynamic of our household, I'm the guy who's trying to get her up on the rock to jump into the lake, and I think, I really want to encode those experiences of being afraid of something, doing it anyway, feeling good about having overcome it, and and repeat. Right.
So as an adult, and you're still pushing it with them, and you got to slow it down a little bit so they can keep up, I guess. Do you also wreck in front of them, and how do they respond to that?
Yeah, I do sometimes. And I try to just mirror what I'm trying to coach them into. So yeah, for sure. I'm still in this glorious phase where my kids think, I can do no wrong, that I'm a superhuman. So I'm just letting the reality creep into their understanding of the world bit by bit. But yeah.
I was just going to say, if we're kind of coming in here to about a couple interesting questions, I think, and I don't know where you'd place this. If you'd place this, in your experience in Canada, if you were a king or queen for a day, what one rule would you change, or put into place, and who would that benefit, and then why would you do it?
I think one thing that would really benefit our societies is if we unbundled the running of the government from moral decisions, like why are low taxes and abortion, or pro-life associated things. What I would do is go direct democracy on moral issues and representational democracy for how to actually run this thing. And I think if we did that, it would really help our societies say, okay, well, my moral, these strict kind of moral things, they're just plebiscite, whatever the majority says, okay, that'll work. But when it comes to actually running a government that helps do the fundamental things of government, I'm just going to vote for the most competent person. And I think that unbundling, which I feel like you can do now, you can poll your populace for their opinion on stuff in a pretty friction-free way today on their smartphones. We haven't really rethought how you mix direct democracy and representational democracy and unbundle, some of the things that end up bundled together in government. So I think that's one tweak. If you did that, there's a chance you would have kind of some much better outcomes in many different domains.
who would be the biggest beneficiaries and who would bear the most cost in that?
I think the who would bear the most cost would be the I don't want to call it the political class, but the established power structures, right? That leverage, a set of moral tendencies of various groups to drive through agendas that often are counterproductive for those groups. So, I'm not going to call out specific political parties or anything like that, but I think that would be a net like they would lose from this new Adrian rule for the world. And I think the people in general would win because they would have a much more direct way to have the society they want, but then also have a society that works well to deliver, kind of the things they care about.
Let me ask you another question, sort of about the practice of wealth or the practice of financial freedom. As you observe what people do you notice that there are kind of self-defeating behaviors? Like, do you notice something that where people tend to get in their own way as they pursue these kind of things?
Yeah. Again, there are different prescriptions at different phases of wealth, but one of the biggest distortions I see is just how people see money. It's like, oh, there's this kind of money, there's that kind of money. Oh, I view my, wealth this way and income that way. And, oh, there's this money that's, at the end of the day, once you have, like, it's very well known, the decorrelation of wealth and happiness over whatever it is, 80 grand a year or something of household income. So after that, for me, wealth is potential energy. Just think about it that way. It's, it's you just store up, you have to create some value to get the money, or ideally, there's all sorts of grifts and whatever, but in the ideal world, you create some value, so you accumulate some wealth. That wealth is potential energy that can then be deployed to accomplish something. And I think, very quickly you run out of ways to turn money into happiness through your own consumption. So then after that, it's like, oh, I've got this potential energy that I created in some other domain. What do I want to do with it? And that's where, for me, Madiro is a super fulfilling. I don't want to be on I don't really care about the leaderboard of, what are you going to die with in your bank account? But I do care, and not in a fully altruistic way, of, the impact we're going to have on people through the activities of that. But if you're truly self-aware, I think it's like, yeah, you're really just chasing recognition and, admiration of your peers and whatever it is. And so that's a great way to think of, like, if you conceive of money the right way, then decisions like that just kind of pop out, no friction, and they're in balance with everything else in your life. So that's part of my recipe.
So you've experienced quite a bit of success, and maybe that's background, maybe that's your own drive, all those things combined. What would you say to somebody that is listening to this podcast going, well, he could do it because he's so lucky, he had this, he had that, he had this. What are some of the concrete things they can do, or any individual can do, to actually improve their own circumstances and outcomes?
I mean, there's no doubt I had plenty good starting spots in this race, and I also had plenty of luck. So, but what I think is, I won't say is universally good advice, but for people who want to be on an entrepreneurial journey, what I think is universally good advice is, don't overthink it. Don't end up in analysis paralysis. If you want to do something, you just have to start doing it, and you'll figure out what's really important to success once you're in it. To think you can, sit and build the perfect business plan or design the perfect product or assemble the perfect team. It's like, no, pick something you care about, pick a space that, ideally is growing and not shrinking. And, maybe pick some people you want to work with on that journey, start, and the rest will come. That's probably my number one piece of advice for anyone who wants to be on or start an entrepreneurial journey.
So there is a there's an analogy that I wanted to use with Arno that I wasn't able to, that is apt right now. And that is when you're rock climbing, if you get up 2 additional inches, suddenly you have new holds you didn't know were there. So the idea of starting and getting in motion, starting with action and not worrying about thinking too much about it, but you act, then suddenly opportunities arise. Then you act some more, you learn some, and then suddenly more opportunities arise. That's really important. That's a really good tip, I think, can apply for a lot of folks. So thanks, Adrian.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Adrian, I don't know. Is there anything else you would like to add? Because that kind of brings us to the end of the questions that we had lined up for you today.
No, I think I'm good.
And can you also just tell us if there's any way that people want to learn more about what you do or connect with you? What would be the best way to do that?
So if you're curious about AlayaCare, check out AlayaCare.com, Madiro.org as URL from the Madiro Fund. And probably best way to get me is on LinkedIn, Adrian Schauer. You'll find me, drop me a note, send me a connection request. Look forward to chat.
Okay, well, Adrian, this has been a pleasure. I know we get to talk around the dinner table often enough, but it's really cool to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right. Talk to you guys later.